Another thing that's an advantage is the claim procedure. Now, we talked a little bit about those disclosure obligations and obtaining the claim file and plan documents and guidelines and so forth, and all of that is important, and that is part of the claim procedure. The way the claim procedure works is there are time limits for the insurance company to make a decision, and then you have time limits to respond to that decision. For example, with a long-term disability case, they're supposed to make the initial claim decision within a maximum of 105 days, even with extensions. They're supposed to make it in a shorter time, but if there's circumstances beyond their control, it can be longer and up to 105 days. Then the claimant has a minimum of at least 180 days. It could be longer, but the claim procedure regulation says the least amount of time you should be allowed is 180 days to appeal and challenge that determination. So during that time, you want to immediately get the claim record and all the plan documents, and then you want to marshal your evidence and articulate your evidence back to the insurance company. And that's where a skilled ERISA practitioner comes in handy. That's the time when you want to make the claim record very strong so that you show that there's no reasonable basis whatsoever to the insurance company's decision. This claim process, which is supposed to involve a meaningful exchange of information and meaningful disclosure, is very good for claimants because it allows the possibility of either prevailing with your claim because you know exactly why it was denied once you receive all those documents and information, or it allows you to make your claim record very strong so that when you take it into litigation, you don't have a loser of a case. You want to make your claim record very strong so you have a winning case going into litigation so that you have made it as strong as it can be. You go into litigation with a weak case and you will lose. So obtaining an attorney during that claim process is important, but the claim process itself is a big advantage to ERISA claimants. Now, if the decision maker, whether it's an insurance company or plan administrator or claims administrator, is not fair during the claim process and they violate the claim procedure regulation, well then the Department of Labor says the claim is deemed exhausted. That means you don't have to continue to go through that claim process anymore because there's so much unfairness that there will be no full and fair review. And therefore you have a right to go into litigation at that point. And that often can happen. And that's because insurance companies have adopted a doctrine called substantial compliance, and some courts have bought into that. And substantial compliance means close enough ought to be good enough. So even if I'm acting unfair, if I'm sort of fair, if I'm substantially complying, well then that ought to be good enough. Well, that creates a lot of vagueness and uncertainty in the claim process. Either you follow the rules or you don't. And the Department of Labor said, we don't like that substantial compliance thing. They need to be real close to following our minimum standards here. And if they're not real close to following them, then the claimant should be able to proceed with litigation. The claim should be deemed exhausted. So it ought to be a claim process that's conducted fairly, where there's a meaningful exchange of information back and forth, and the claimant ought to be able to comment on whatever evidence is being used to deny that claim.